My name is Elena Park. I'm 41 years old, and for the past 14 years, I've served as the Director of International Development at Colburn Dynamics, a privately held family corporation headquartered in Seattle. 14 years of my life, given wholly to a company that never quite remembered to say my name out loud. I wasn't part of the founding family. I didn't graduate from an Ivy League school, nor did I play golf with the board on weekends. But I built the Southeast Asia division from scratch. I negotiated cross-border partnerships before the company even had multilingual legal teams. I was the quiet backbone, the kind of professional who always delivered, rarely demanded, and never took credit for someone else's work. And yet, despite all of that, I didn't have a plaque with my name on it. My photo didn't hang on the legacy wall. And when the company celebrated its anniversary with an executive-only yacht party last year, I received a thank you email and a branded pen. That morning, I entered the weekly leadership meeting just as I had for years early, quiet, focused. I took my usual seat third row from the front, not too close to the screen, not too far to be forgotten. The room buzzed with unfamiliar energy, new faces, nervous chatter, and then he walked in Nathaniel Reed. He was only 29, fresh from a tech startup that had burned bright and then imploded faster than a social media trend. More importantly, he was the chairman's eldest grandson. He had been announced just last week as the interim CEO, though everyone understood that in this company. Interim was code for entitled to it from birth. Nathaniel didn't sit down. He stood in front of the screen, hands in his pockets, oozing the kind of casual arrogance that comes from knowing the rules don't apply to you. "We're streamlining operations," he announced. "That means reevaluating certain roles and redistributing leadership." No one dared breathe. Then came the moment. Clean, efficient, cruel. "Elena Park," he said, scanning the room like he was calling on a substitute teacher. "We appreciate your contributions, but they've run their course. Just like that. No performance review, no discussion, no offer to transition. 14 years, distilled into one dispassionate line. I hadn't even opened my laptop yet. I didn't argue. I didn't blink. I simply gathered my notebook and stood. No one stopped me. No one stood in solidarity. No one said a word, except a young intern nervous. Maybe 19 who accidentally handed me a coffee meant for someone else. It had the wrong name written on the cup. I took it anyway. It was the only thing that had my name on it that day. I walked out of that meeting with my head held high, but my hands were trembling. The branded paper cup with someone else's name on it had gone cold by the time I reached the parking garage. I didn't drive home. I sat in my car, engine off, eyes fixed on the concrete wall in front of me, letting the silence settle over the shock. 3 hours passed like mist. In front of me sat the folder I always carried, tattered from use, but meticulously organized. Inside were the drafts, research notes, and strategy briefs for the biggest deal Colburn Dynamics had pursued in the last 5 years, a cross-border distribution agreement with Marvin Tech Dubai. Estimated value, $8.2 million. I had cultivated that relationship for 7 relentless months. Flew to Dubai twice, learned enough Arabic to hold casual conversations, tailored the proposal to align with both U.S. regulations and Emirati expectations. I knew the CEO's assistant's birthday. I knew their procurement director's favorite tea. More importantly, I was the only person authorized to finalize the deal. After a botched acquisition 2 years ago that resulted in a costly lawsuit, the company had quietly implemented a series of special legal clauses for high-risk international accounts. Clause 18B.1, my clause specified that only the designated lead negotiator, named explicitly in the agreement, could sign or modify Marvin Tech's terms. That person was me, and it had to be me. I reached for my phone and pulled up my company inbox. My access hadn't been revoked yet, another oversight. There, buried beneath an avalanche of announcements and team chats, was a forwarded meeting invite, sent by Nathaniel. The subject line read, Marvin Tech Review, Tuesday, 10 a.m. He had replaced my name with one I didn't recognize, Camden Bryce, a mid-level associate in strategic accounts who'd joined the firm less than 3 months ago. I remembered him from the elevator once, polished suit, empty eyes. He had never been briefed on Marvin Tech. I stared at the screen for a long time. My pulse didn't quicken. It slowed. Then I opened a new message. I typed only one sentence and sent it to the Internal Legal Counsel. Please review Clause 18B.1 of the Marvin Tech Preliminary Agreement. No pleasantries, no explanations. Just a surgical insertion of truth. I knew what I was doing. And I knew they didn't. That evening, I didn't cook dinner. I didn't answer the calls from two colleagues who had seen me walk out and wanted to check in. I let the questions hang in the air, unanswered. Instead, I watched the skyline from my apartment window as the sun bled into the horizon. Somewhere in the shadows of those buildings, Nathaniel was probably pouring himself a drink, basking in his perceived victory. At 9:12 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost declined it. Then I saw the country code domestic, landline, the kind of number you only memorize if it once mattered. I picked up Elena. The voice was calm but carried tension beneath every syllable. It was Howard Reed, the chairman, Nathaniel's grandfather and the man who had first interviewed me 14 years ago in a cramped office full of maps and framed contracts. Howard, I said quietly. I just got off a call with Marvin Tech. He said, they're confused why your name isn't on the meeting brief. They called me directly, said they won't sign without you present. He paused. Elena, were you pulled from the project? Yes, I said. By who, Nathaniel? I replied. Silence on the line, then a slow exhale. And he thinks Camden can handle it. He asked, almost rhetorically. I don't believe Camden has even seen the Arabic version of the agreement, I said flatly. There was a long pause before Howard spoke again, his voice lower. I need you to send me everything you've built for that account, every memo, every translated clause. Tonight, I already have it ready, I said. Another pause. Then, softer, Elena. I'm sorry. I didn't approve this. I had no idea. I know. I replied, that's the problem. We ended the call with no resolution. But something had shifted. Howard Reed was not a man easily rattled. But tonight, he sounded less like a chairman and more like a grandfather who just realized the boy he handed the keys to wasn't ready to drive. I leaned back on the couch, watching the lights blink on across the city. My laptop was open on the coffee table, the contract highlighted and bookmarked. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this much. The only thing more dangerous than being underestimated is when those underestimating you depend on you without knowing it. Howard didn't offer me my job back. I didn't ask for it, either. What I said to him before ending our call was simple. You don't need to reinstate me. But if you want to keep Marvin Tech, you need to reinstate the truth. That morning, I arrived at Colburn Dynamics not through the employee entrance, but through the front lobby just like any external consultant or special guest. I wore a navy pantsuit I hadn't touched in years, hair pinned back, and in my arms I carried a black folio containing everything Marvin Tech had signed, discussed, and trusted me with over the past 7 months. Security didn't question me. They'd received a memo. The receptionist stood the moment she saw me. Ms. Park, she stammered. Mr. Reed is expecting you, not Mr. Nathaniel, Mr. Howard. I nodded politely and stepped onto the elevator. My heart was strangely calm, maybe because I had nothing to prove. I wasn't coming back for a second chance. I was coming back because their survival at this point depended on me. When the elevator doors opened on the executive floor, the first face I saw was Nathaniel's. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, mid-sentence with someone from finance, gesturing at a tablet like he owned the floor. He froze when he saw me. Our eyes met. I didn't flinch. 3 people emerged behind me, 2 from the legal team and 1 from compliance, all handpicked by Howard. The silence in the hallway was so thick, you could hear the low hum of the fluorescent lights above. Nathaniel blinked once, then forced a grin. Ms. Park, didn't expect to see you. Clearly, I said. I didn't stop to explain anything. I turned toward the East Conference Wing Boardroom A, where the Marvin Tech delegation was already waiting. I could feel his stare burning into my back, but I didn't turn around. When I reached the door, I paused for a breath. Then I entered. There were 5 men inside, all dressed sharply, their skins sun-kissed from a Dubai summer. Their CEO, Mr. Abbas al-Miraj, looked up from his tea and scanned the room. His eyes narrowed. He spoke in Arabic to no one in particular. Where is Ms. Elena Park? We do not proceed without her. Before the awkward silence could stretch further, I stepped forward and answered in fluent Arabic apologies for the confusion. We may begin now. Mr. Al-Miraj's face transformed from suspicion to recognition, then to a soft, rare smile. He stood and shook my hand. Respect, he said, is not a detail. It is the foundation. Nathaniel was nowhere in sight. The next 2 hours unfolded with a quiet intensity. I led the negotiation like I always had measured, attentive, thorough. Every item on the agenda, every clause in the addendum, every translation double-checked and confirmed. At one point, one of the Emirati advisors leaned over to whisper something to his colleague. They both glanced at me, nodded, and smiled. I knew that look. It meant they trusted me again. By the end of the session, the contract was signed, sealed, finalized. It was the largest international partnership Colburn Dynamics had ever closed without external counsel. After the delegation left, the boardroom slowly emptied, but I stayed behind, gathering my notes, organizing files. That's when Howard entered, his pace slower than usual, a look of both relief and guilt on his face. He didn't sit. You saved us, he said plainly. I looked up. No, I said, I saved the deal. Us is still up for discussion. He gave a tired, sheepish smile. You were right, he said. I gave Nathaniel too much. Too soon. I thought I was preparing him to lead. Turns out I was shielding him from having to earn it. I didn't respond, not immediately. I wasn't ready to forgive him, but I wasn't here for that either. I need your voice in the room going forward. He continued. Not just your work, your presence, only under conditions. I said, full control over the Marvin Tech rollout, no interference, and anything I sign is final. He nodded, agreed. And Nathaniel, I'll handle it, he said, privately, for now. I closed my folio. Make it public when you're ready, but don't wait too long. Silence isn't neutral anymore. Howard nodded again. Slower this time. Then he stepped aside as I walked past him, back down the hall I had been dismissed from just 2 days before. This time, people looked up. Conversations paused, heads turned, some stood. I didn't acknowledge it. I didn't need to, because I hadn't come back for applause. I'd come back because I never should have been forced to leave in the first place. The applause never mattered. The handshake from Howard, the quiet nods from executives, none of it erased what had been done, or what I knew was coming next. I had walked back into Colburn Dynamics with control. That was enough to close the Marvin Tech deal. But power is never surrendered quietly, especially by men who inherited it, not earned it. Nathaniel didn't storm or shout after being sidelined. He smiled. That kind of smile you see in old paintings of kings who know the poison has already been poured. It began slowly. At first, a travel reimbursement for my trip to Dubai, previously pre-approved, was flagged for missing documentation. Then, the final report I submitted for post-contract analysis was returned for formatting inconsistencies, despite matching the company template exactly. My team members normally responsive started missing deadlines or showing up late to check-ins. When I asked, their answers were vague. Their eyes avoided mine. Then it escalated. An internal newsletter went out from corporate comms with updates about the Marvin Tech deal. I wasn't mentioned. Instead, it credited cross-functional collaboration under the new leadership transition, a phrase so hollow it practically echoed. I didn't say anything. Not to HR, not to Howard, not even to the team I once led. I started documenting everything. Emails with altered timestamps, shared folders where files were renamed or overwritten, memos I had never seen with my digital signature attached. I kept a printed binder at home and a USB drive hidden inside a hollowed-out copy of The Art of War. The irony wasn't lost on me. I also created a private, time-stamped log, a spreadsheet of subtle sabotage. I included witnesses, patterns, login data, server access points. Every small act of erasure or manipulation was like a brushstroke in a larger painting, one that showed Nathaniel trying to make me disappear without ever firing a shot. But I wasn't just watching him. I was listening. One Thursday evening, just past 9 Surapum May Porshim, I was still in the office. My laptop was syncing the Arabic documentation for Marvin Tech, and I had stepped into the break room to get tea. As I returned, I heard voices echoing from the north corridor, the executive wing. The doors there were usually locked after hours, but one had been left ajar. I stopped walking. She's destabilizing the whole floor, Nathaniel was saying. His voice wasn't angry, it was careful, calculated. I'm not saying we fire her outright, he continued, but she's erratic. There are days she won't even make eye contact. Ask her team, they're uneasy. I mean, look at her emails. The tone's off. She's under too much pressure. That's a liability. Another voice responded, uncertain, younger. But she closed Marvin Tech under that pressure. Nathaniel cut in, dismissive. She got lucky. One contract doesn't mean she's fit to lead. My hands didn't shake. My pulse didn't spike. I simply pulled out my phone, turned on the voice recorder, and captured every word. The next morning, I didn't go straight to my office. I walked into the internal audit department and placed an unmarked envelope on the desk of Marcus Lane, the lead investigator. Inside the recording, printed screenshots of altered documents, metadata logs, and the beginnings of a pattern I had traced across 3 departments. I said only one thing before I left. I think you know where to start. Then I walked out. I didn't hear from anyone for 5 days. Not a whisper, but I knew what silence meant in a corporation like Colburn Dynamics, not inaction, but incubation. An internal investigation had begun, quiet, surgical, and invisible. Nathaniel, as always, had no idea. He started ramping up the campaign. An email supposedly from me sent from a shared terminal misstated tax terms in a follow-up to Marvin Tech. The mistake could have jeopardized the deal if I hadn't had a direct relationship with their CFO, who called me personally to ask, "Did you mean to quote that rate I didn't?" I never sent it. It confirmed the message had originated from inside our own network under my login, but from a machine I'd never used. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in the glass conference room, lights dimmed, watching the city through one-way blinds. Colburn Tower rose around me, a palace of policy and perception. I sat with my notes and my tea and stared out at the skyline I had once loved. Then a voice broke the stillness. "Elena, you're still here. Howard." He stepped into the room, holding a folder. His face was tight, not angry, disturbed. "I was hoping you would be," he said. He placed the folder down. "I know what he's doing." He added, "I stayed silent. I've seen enough," he said again. But I needed to know if he'd stop himself, if he'd see the line. And now I asked. He shook his head. "Now I know." He never saw the line to begin with. I opened the folder. My revised contract was inside unaltered, fully executed. Next to it, a printed report from the audit team, with highlighter marks and tabs. "This is just the beginning," he said. "There will be a formal meeting. I'll be there." I replied, "No one's asking you to testify." "I know," I said. "That's why I'll show up. Because this war wasn't about a position or pride anymore. It was about proving to every silent corner of the building that a woman doesn't have to smile to survive. She only has to refuse to disappear." The folder Howard handed me was only the beginning. What came next would be something far more public, far more permanent. A formal meeting with the Executive Review Committee was scheduled for Friday morning. I wasn't required to be there. I insisted on attending. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted a seat at the table where silence had once kept me invisible. The boardroom was different that morning. Not in appearance, it was the same glass-paneled space with its polished wood, towering windows, and white ceramic coffee carafes, but in atmosphere. The air was tighter, charged. People shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, eyes flicking toward the doorway like they expected lightning to strike mid-meeting. Howard was already seated at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to his elbows. No tie. His expression was unreadable, as it always was when something serious was about to happen. Next to him sat Marcus from Internal Audit and two other investigators. Their laptops were open. A thick binder sat in the center of the table, tabbed and flagged. I took my seat on the left side of the table. A chair had been left for me intentionally. I assumed, though no one said it out loud. 10 minutes passed. Then the door opened. Nathaniel walked in as if nothing was out of place. He wore a tailored navy suit, phone in hand, one brow slightly arched. He paused when he saw me already seated, but recovered quickly with a half smile. "She's not on the audit committee," he said, still standing. Howard didn't turn. "She's here at my request. This is supposed to be internal. Confidential." His voice tried to sound calm, but there was a thread of unease running just beneath the surface. I looked at him, my voice level. "Then you should have kept it internal when you used internal systems to impersonate me." Nathaniel's smirk faltered. Marcus cleared his throat. "We'll begin." The audit team wasted no time. The presentation was precise, methodical, ruthless in its clarity. Every manipulated document, every falsified login, every phantom email sent from a shared machine tied to Nathaniel's assistant's credentials, screen recordings, metadata trails, logs of deletions and file renames, even the late-night voice recording I had captured, transcribed, and verified. Nathaniel tried to interject halfway through. "You're twisting this. You're reading into coincidental access. Camden shares that workstation. Camden was in Miami the day the login occurred." Marcus cut in. "We verified his travel records. His badge never pinged the building's security that entire week." Nathaniel leaned back, arms crossed, jaw tightening. Howard hadn't said a word yet. But then, just as the presentation wrapped, he reached into his own folder and pulled out a printed document. It was the original draft of the Marvin Tech contract. Clause 18B.1 was highlighted in neon yellow. He turned to Nathaniel and, finally, spoke. "Did you read this before you reassigned Elena's role?" Nathaniel blinked, caught between defiance and confusion. We were moving in a new direction. Delegating." "That's not what I asked." Nathaniel swallowed. "No, I didn't read every clause. But stop there," Howard said. He looked at the rest of the room, then back at his grandson. "This clause gave Elena sole negotiating authority for the entire account. You not only removed her without review, you jeopardized the largest international deal this company has ever attempted." Nathaniel's expression turned defensive, and she came back. "Didn't she? She made the deal. So what's the harm?" I finally spoke. "The harm," I said quietly, "is that you didn't just remove me. You tried to erase me. When that didn't work, you tried to discredit me. And when that didn't work either, you turned to sabotage." Nathaniel rolled his eyes. "This is just a personal grudge. She's upset because she was phased out." Howard slammed the table with a flat palm once, sharp final. "This isn't about feelings. Nathaniel, this is about integrity. This is about what it means to lead. And you've failed." Silence wrapped around the table like a shroud. No one moved. Howard stood. "The committee will vote on final disciplinary action, but my recommendation is immediate suspension, removal from all internal systems, termination of executive access, effective by end of day." Nathaniel stood too, voice shaking now. "You can't do this, I can," Howard said. "And I will, for the first time." Nathaniel looked at me, not with arrogance or annoyance, but disbelief, like the floor beneath him had shifted and he didn't know where to step next. He didn't speak again. Security escorted him from the floor 20 minutes later. Not in handcuffs, not with scandal, just quiet footsteps and a badge that no longer opened any doors. After the meeting, I remained seated as the boardroom cleared. Howard lingered, hands in his pockets. "You didn't want this," he said. "No," I replied, "but I needed it to happen." He nodded. I failed him. Maybe as a mentor, maybe as a grandfather. "You gave him a ladder," I said. "He chose what to do with it." He nodded once more, then turned and left. And just like that, it was over. No press release, no shareholder memo, just a silent rebalancing. In the weeks that followed, the aftershocks moved through the building. Nathaniel's name disappeared from directories. Projects he had pushed through were quietly paused, reassigned, or unwound. The Marvin Tech deal made headlines in 3 trade publications. I wasn't mentioned by name, but I didn't need to be. Everyone who mattered already knew. The people who had ignored me in meetings began to greet me in elevators. Junior staff left notes on my desk. One even asked to shadow me. The very same people who once treated me like a quiet fixture now saw something else. Not a survivor. A root. And suddenly, everyone was remembering who planted the tree they had been sitting under all along. The echoes of Nathaniel's removal hadn't yet faded when Howard called me into his office again. He sat behind his desk, not with urgency this time, but with something steadier, more deliberate. "I'd like you to take over as Executive Director of Global Strategy," he said, "permanent, reporting directly to me." He didn't sell it like a favor. He presented it like a fact. The right outcome after a long, crooked road. I said yes, but not immediately. I laid down my terms. I wanted structural reform in place, anonymous reporting channels, employee protections against coercive exits, a standardized and transparent path to promotion. I wasn't interested in titles. I was interested in never letting this happen again to anyone. He agreed, and for once, I believed it wasn't just to keep me quiet. Over the next few weeks, I returned to my office not as the forgotten figure tucked between departments, but as the architect of something new. My first move was simple. I scheduled one-on-one check-ins with every employee in my division, regardless of rank, not to monitor them, to hear them. Stories began pouring in. People I hadn't spoken to in years came forward, some sheepishly, others with cautious hope. They told me of their small humiliations, their long silences, the invisible ceilings they'd learned to stop pushing against. One woman, a project manager from Product Innovation, left a note on my desk that read, "Thank you for proving the door was never locked, just hidden." Some of the colleagues who had once avoided my eye in the hallway now asked to collaborate. Some apologized, others didn't, too proud, too late, but I didn't need their apologies. One afternoon, I entered a full staff meeting, the same meeting room where, months ago, I'd been erased without a second thought. As I stepped through the doorway, more than 40 employees, managers, interns, team leads rose quietly from their seats. No clapping, no performance, just the quiet act of standing. I didn't nod or smile. I simply took my seat. I hadn't asked for power. I had asked for fairness. And it turned out, when fairness takes the lead, respect follows without needing permission. In this new role, I didn't move into the corner office. I declined it. Instead, I kept my workspace by the floor-to-ceiling window on the 3rd floor, the one facing west, where the late sun hits just right. It wasn't out of humility. It was out of memory. I needed to remember who I was when no one else did. There were still difficult days. Internal politics don't vanish with a personnel change, but the fear that once choked the air had thinned. People were speaking up more, laughing more. There was movement again, real, deliberate progress. As for Nathaniel, I heard through quiet channels that he was consulting for a small private firm out of state. Rumors said Howard had made sure his name wouldn't be dragged in the press, perhaps his final act as a grandfather. I didn't ask. I didn't need to. His chapter had closed. Mine had not. Some weeks later, I was invited to join the annual leadership summit. I saw my name on the agenda official. Final, unmissable. A seat had been prepared for me at the main table, but this time, I wasn't surprised. I arrived 5 minutes early, walked past familiar faces, some respectful, some still uncertain, and took my seat without hesitation. Not because I was invited, but because I belonged there. Because the work that mattered, the integrity, the clarity, the consistency had never stopped. Even when I had been invisible. Even the walls knew it. I used to think being seen was the destination. That recognition was the reward for doing the right thing in silence. But now, I know better. My worth doesn't rise or fall based on whether a room acknowledges it. It exists regardless of attention, in the substance of my choices, in the quiet ways I kept showing up when it would have been easier to vanish. I no longer chase belonging. I define it. I don't need to fight for a seat at every table. Sometimes, I am the table. So when they called the meeting to order, I didn't look around for approval. I adjusted my jacket, uncapped my pen, and leaned forward. And as the first slide appeared on the screen, I whispered a truth I no longer had to prove. Dignity can't be taken. It can only be surrendered. And I never did.